world where achievements and accolades motivate us to do more and be more, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there is more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old, push your way through, and claim the deeper life that's calling you.
That's where we excel.
We're your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Stephanie.
And this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Sit back and relax as we share the shortcuts we've uncovered to help you make shift happen.
Hi, welcome to the Soulful Leader Podcast. I'm Stephanie and I'm here with Maren. And we're going to talk a little bit about soil and soul to soil. And we want to really share with this because there's a great metaphor to leadership here. And I'm going to kind of go back 30 years ago when I first met Maren, because when I met Maren in Durango, Colorado, back in the 1990s, I was kind of had my own all or nothing thinking that, I had a science degree and I took phys ed and I had it all figured out around nutrition and all that stuff. And I was living in California at the time and met with Maren, and she had this wonderful story about organics. And, for me, 30 years ago, organics, I was like, what are you talking about organics? Like, is it just kind of like a media marketing corporate sort of thing that's just trying to like make me pay more money for the apple?
Right.
I had no idea.
So many people think that, and they still think that.
And they still think that. And I have to say, it was Maren and my conversation that literally shifted my whole trajectory of life on how I chose food and what it meant to me, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So, soul to soil in leadership, there's a lot of relationships here, and I would love to share with you more. So Maren, do tell us, because you are an avid gardener and have a wonderful relationship with Mother Nature. And I know you feel like you're just like a baby with it, but to me, you're like this guru, because I feel like I did not have that relationship growing up as you did with your mother, and understanding seed and the whole organics. And I would love to just share with our soulful leaders out there on what it is and why it's so important and how it might relate into leadership.
So the thing about, like, a little bit about my background is my mom and I had an heirloom seed company. And what that means is in our culture, we've hybridized seeds. And the reason that we've hybridized seeds is because the big corporations wanted to be able to plant huge monocultures that would be easily shipped. Their skins wouldn't break. They would be uniform in size so that they could have the same packaging. Basically, they wanted to cut the costs and improve the shippability of food.
Which,
so imagine.
So even that right there, like most of us, who doesn't want to cut costs and save money and be more productive and yada, 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 right? But there is a cost on another level.
Exactly. So what happens when you hybridized for, the shape and the size to keep everything standardized and make it easy so that your machines can go through the fields and quickly pick things and et cetera, is that we end up losing something in that process. And what ends up happening is you lose flavor. And a lot of us remember, a tomato from, and maybe the younger people don't, but you and I do, from when we were younger. Like, tomatoes tasted different. Tomatoes in the store today, you can find heirloom tomatoes now, and they have that old-fashioned flavor. Whereas a lot of the tomatoes are like these pink orbs that are kind of wooden and don't have much flavor. And so that's what ends up happening is and they have directly linked flavor with nutrition. So the more flavorful something is, and the more colorful something is, the more nutrition there is in that, whatever the food is.
Beauty and awe right there.
Yeah.
Beauty and art. I even would even say if you can pick the most flavorful, beautiful items and actually create something beautiful, then I mean, there's science that's being shown this, that there's greater hydrogen atoms that actually get released in your body, and that there's been science proving that it reduces inflammation. So it's not even so much about what quote unquote you're eating, but how it's created, the intention behind what is created, how it's put together. There's so much richness in your in the in the discovery, in the experience, and in the display of what is being fed to us. We're fed on so many more levels than just physical.
And when you enjoy that, because the flavor and the color and the excitement, and now the dopamine and the oxytocin and all of the chemicals in our brain get released because we're in joy. So it does go layers and layers down. So what ends up happening with the monocultures that are created by the large corporations in order to save money and have a better, more robust bottom line, is that we were losing seed diversity. Now, the thing about nature, nature is abundant and increases diversity and complexity. That's the way that she.
So say that again, because this is important.
This is important. That's the way that nature works, the way that life becomes abundant on our planet is because nature increases in diversity and in complexity. So she's always creating, like, we don't have one perfect butterfly. We've got like 1700, 17, I don't even know how many butterflies we have. There's all these slight variations. There's lots of butterflies, and there's a reason for that. As humans, we like to try and simplify. We've been taught that we need to simplify and control.
And be the same as everyone else. We
And
cut
this
out our
is,
diversity.
we do. And the problem that we create, and this is the metaphor that's happening here, is that when we create a monoculture, we end up with diseases and bugs and all kinds of problems with that monoculture because we don't have the diversity and the ecosystem around that and all the complexity to handle it. So now we have to come up with chemicals to deal with the issues that we've created with a monoculture.
So this is so powerful because, I mean, the big term that we've been hearing so much about is inclusivity. And, there's a lot of, I mean, I live in Canada, you live in the States, we live in two different countries, but the whole idea about immigration and welcoming newcomers into this, into our, we need this. We need to start to be able to come together and collaborate and diversify, because this is what is going to be our answer, both personal and collective, to our problems. And how this relates in leadership is that we need to have a whole new way of thinking, believing, and seeing this from unfolding, like from a higher vision. And nature, the book of nature, the book of life, it always has, like, if you could sit out in nature, it's a great practice to do, by the way. I do this with my clients. Say, if you have a problem, an issue, I don't care what it is, whether it's health, relationship, finances, whatever it is, take that issue, whatever the issue is, and go out, sit in nature and say, if this tree or if this stream or if this bird had this issue, how would it unfold it? What would its solution be? Because nature always will give us the answer. And I think this is such a lovely, like I said, soil to soul. It's everything that we need. You and I have talked about this before. It's like, even in nature, there is the problem and the solution is right next to each other in nature, always. Like, nature is so beautiful.
It really is. So the thing for all of us to think about, I love what you were talking about, because diversity and complexity gets a really bad rap. It's like, we don't want complex lives, and yet there's so much richness in the complexity. And we lose out. We really lose out when we don't have that inclusivity of diversity. Lots of those ICID words aren't there. So one of the things that was happening, and the reason that my mom and I had an heirloom seed company, is because in the process of hybridization, the large corporations were taking and eliminating other seeds. And so there was a groundswell movement that started probably 50 years ago, and we were part of it 20, 30 years ago, and it's still going on, to save the diversity. I mean, there used to be 500 versions of varieties of tomatoes, maybe 1,000, maybe 1,500, and suddenly we were down to like a couple hundred instead of 2,000 or whatever it was. And so now we can go to, there's a lot of different wonderful seed companies that offer alternative varieties, and even when we go to the supermarket now, we can see those. And when nature has that going on, if something happens to a monoculture, and we've had this with our wheat, or we've had blights that have attacked entire monocultures, and then what do? That's our entire food supply. So if we do things the way that nature does it, which is we create an ecosystem with lots of variety and lots of complexity. And if we think about this from a leadership perspective, if on our teams we have a monoculture and something like we all think alike, and there's a problem and we can't solve it because we all think alike.
Yeah, we're all kind of leaning over on one side.
Exactly. And I did this with my own business, which was interesting. When I first got started, I read people's resumes and I hired people based on what they could do. And what I wasn't thinking about, there's a test that you and I have both, we use a profiling test called Wealth Dynamics now. And before I knew about Wealth Dynamics, I had hired a bunch of people. And later, once I did the test, I realized we all, even though we had different skills on our resume, we all thought alike. And I was very comfortable with these people. I would talk to them in the interviews, and that we had a diverse set of skills. And I understood everybody. I was like, oh yeah, we're going to get along great. We all understood each other. It was wonderful. The problem happened was that I tend to have, in this particular system, it's called dynamo energy. Tend to have a lot of creativity and a lot of dynamo energy. And I hired a lot of people who we spoke the same language. We got along well. And creators like myself were not always the best at finishing things and doing the down
Great
to
at
earth.
getting things started, not so great at
Right.
finishing. Yeah. Yeah.
And what I found about 3 months in was like, we had tons of ideas. It was the most creative group of people, and very little was getting done. And I was getting frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I had been learning about wealth dynamics and I gave everybody the profile test. And I was like, oh, no wonder we all think alike. We're a monoculture. Right.
And we talk about this as empowering, impactful teams, that, you want to be in a culture where everyone is positive and gets along well, and you have a great team environment. And often that's what happens, is you end up with a monoculture. And we
Yes.
shy away from conflict because, we think, oh my gosh, they're trying to make us wrong and right. There's egos that get in the way, I'm better, or I'm not getting the attention or the value, and it becomes friction. And I keep saying it, to my clients, I'm like, you can continue to keep leaving your job or your relationship or your town or city and go somewhere else. But if we don't do the internal work, then we just keep creating. We've heard that wherever you go, there you are, kind of thing.
Right.
But what's happening is that we're looking for that monoculture where we feel safe and we feel like we belong. Yet that's not where growth is going to happen. That's not where diversity is going to happen. That's not where scaling up and reaching all of the possibilities that we're meant to step into is going to happen. It actually, when we have conflict, like sandpaper, that part that comes together is that it's polishing you. And instead of looking at that as harmful or irritating or victimizing, if we can look at it saying, okay, what is this helping me become? And is it literally helping me, I wouldn't say like annihilate my own ego, because the ego is what keeps us separate. When we get into the I'm right and you're wrong, or I'm good and you're bad, or this is ethical or unethical, we create that division, create that separation. Just the same as you have, like you're speaking of, you're a dynamo, great at beginning things, having big ideas and big potentials of possibilities, but sometimes it doesn't really get planted in the soil,
Right.
and it's time to let go. Time to pass it on and let it go, and that's hard for dynamo energies. We like control. No.
And when I actually learned to do that and let go and realize that somebody who thinks differently than I do is actually what I needed on my team, someone that I don't understand. It's like, I don't get you. I don't understand you. I don't get you.
Mhm.
And that's what I needed on my team. And when I started to hire, not from a resume, because like I said, we all had diverse skills. So it wasn't the skill set. It
The
was,
thinking.
yeah, it was the thinking.
Mhm.
And so I started hiring people that I started to learn to ask different questions in my hiring process, and the language that the people who are really good at planting things in the soil and making them grow and doing that side of things, not the idea people, like what's the language that they use. When I started to actually do that and say I don't understand you and I love that, and please come onto my team because I need your energy, I need your thought process.
This is very similar, like in relationships, whether it's friendships or, marriages, whatever it might be, working relationships. It's like opposites tend to attract. And,
Mm.
you know, almost always I'll hear somebody say, I wish, my partner would be more like me. Why can't they think like I do? Because it would be so much easier. And there's a part of this, it's kind of like the comfort zone. And we all know that the comfort zone actually kills us. And it's not to obviously take yourself out of the comfort zone so much that it's always traumatizing and dramatizing you, but to be able to step out of your comfort zone requires us to do so in order for us to evolve.
Mm.
And if we have someone who's different than us, then you are on this journey. It's like you have the same mission or you have the same values. That's where you connect. And so how you get there is going to be completely different. And that's actually good. And
Yeah.
even how you think about it, about your path or your map to get there is going to be good, because what you're doing is contributing to each other's development. And if we look at that differently, rather than like the sandpaper gritting the living daylights out of us, but if we look at it and saying, okay, it's polishing each other, and to lean in, to stay curious and in wonder of like, wow, that's a really interesting perspective. Tell me more. Because I've seen that before, when people are stuck in their right or wrong, good or bad, and you say to them, can you tell me more why you think or believe that? They become defensive.
Mm.
And that actually creates the disharmony and the separation of connection and collaboration.
And I think that comes from our schooling, where we were schooling likes to create a monoculture of like, here's what's right. Right. So if you go to
Here's the
school,
right answer. Here's the wrong answer.
yes,
Mhm.
exactly. And if you are, you experience this, if you're up talking to people and if that's how you learn, you're bad and wrong and you need to sit down and shut up. If you're like me and your head's in the clouds and you're always getting ideas, you need to sit down and do your work, finish your work, Maren. Like, I wasn't celebrated for, hey, you're the idea person, why don't you give us ideas? And you weren't celebrated for, hey, you're the people person, why don't you go and talk to people? It was,
Well, I'm just laughing at that because I remember in university, when they have multiple choice and it's either a right or wrong answer. Like there is no in between. I hated multiple choice. Give me an essay and I always made A's, but give me a multiple choice and I almost barely passed, because I was the person that said, well, A could be correct if it was this situation, or B could be correct if it was that kind of person. Like I would overanalyze it, or I would see it from multiple levels
Yeah.
of questions, right? It's like if the question wasn't worded so specifically and so directly, it was open to interpretation. I just went off. And to me, I shamed myself for that instead of looking at in leadership role of like, that's actually a good thing. Because to be able to shift over into someone else's, perspective or vision or way of being and see it through their lens or through their body opens up it transforms the monoculture. It all of a sudden opens it up and it creates that diversity and inclusion. So it's
Yeah.
like it's not an either or, it becomes the both and.
And because every single one of us has some shame around our gift. We were told that it wasn't, don't brag because so and so doesn't have your gift. No, so and so doesn't have my gift. They have their own gift. So there's this, we come into our work environment with a shame
Mhm.
around our particular gift. And whenever there's a shame around it, there's a need to prove it. So now, when you going back to what you said earlier, of like when you ask somebody, hey, could you tell me more about your perspective? And they get defensive. That comes from, our childhood when we were shamed around, you're not good in your gift is not, I don't want to hear about your gift. Right?
That's right.
Keep your gift to yourself.
Well,
And
and we become controlling of like we might feel threatened of
yes,
our own gifts of like, oh my gosh, if they have totally different gifts than I do, then maybe mine are wrong.
and that's what we were taught. And so as leaders, being able to recognize it and say,
Mhm.
ooh, whenever I start to feel threatened, it's not about me. It's about some part of my life, someplace where I was shamed, either by myself or by school or
Mhm.
by whatever, and told me that like my gifts weren't good enough and you need to prove yourself. If I can take that and just put it on a shelf for a moment and say, you know what? What if I were good enough? And instead of needing this monoculture of having everybody agree with me so that I feel good enough, what if I embraced the diversity for a moment and celebrated that they don't think like I do? And that means that we're both using our gifts. Now we're in a collaborative celebration instead of a siloing, destroying kind of environment, right?
Well, this is so helpful because I'm even relating it to family, a family system.
Hmm.
And you often have a couple who are very opposite and they have a hard time struggling with each other. And then they procreate and they have these children who they also don't understand because they're not just like the parents, or
Hmm.
they are just like the parent that drives them crazy, or they're like themselves at the parts of themselves that they don't like. It's so interesting instead of even creating the diversity in a family and recognizing that each one of us are born with an absolute infinite possibilities. It's like the piece of the puzzle. I, I was thinking about this the other day when you and I were talking, and you said, "You ever done a puzzle and then you finish the puzzle and you're missing a piece?" Drives me crazy. My brother used to do that at Christmas time. We'd do a puzzle together, and somehow he'd sneak in and he'd steal a piece and he'd hide it because he always wants to be the one that puts the last piece in the puzzle. But my mother and I would just about lose it because we're like, "Where is it? Is it under the cushion? Did it get vacuumed up? Did the cat eat it? I don't know." But it's so true. It's like if we look at a puzzle, it creates a black spot. It creates a hole if we're not really developing our gifts and strengths. Instead of what we've been taught is to develop our weaknesses. It's like, no, develop your gifts because it's what creates us being full color hue people, hue persons. And we're looking at this in business instead of just being an AI automation,
Hmm.
read the script. Oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how many times I've had it. And it annoys me. I'm like, can I just talk to a human being? I mean, how
Yeah.
often do you call the 1-800 number and you get press one for this, press two for that? And I'm like, where's the button for I just need to talk to a human being because
Right.
my issue or my question doesn't fit in 1 to 7 here.
Well, that makes sense with your whole multiple choice thing, right?
That's right. See, I'm the problem. Or that's what I've been told, right? Instead of
Right.
saying, what if the very thing that you've been shamed at or blamed at or you've tried to hide, or what if that was actually your superpower? What if that was it?
Here's a really easy way to think about it. The elm tree doesn't look at the oak tree and say, I should be an oak. The oak tree doesn't look at a sunflower and say, ooh, I should be a sunflower. Right? I mean, like,
That's right.
it's so obvious to us in nature.
And the
that's
mother
why
tree feeds all of them.
they do. So the thing about, in case you're unfamiliar with the book called The Mother Tree, they're in nature, trees are not competitive, and actually all plants are not competitive. They cooperate. And there's been an entire study that was done on how they cooperate and the mycelium in the soil that helps them to literally send messages between each other. So plants are communicating through the soil, through to each other. They send each other nutrients, they send each other messages about predators that are coming. They literally talk to each other and in a cooperative way. And this is where, if I have a monoculture of all elm trees and Dutch elm disease comes along, I wipe out the entire thing, right? Whereas if I have a multiple, like a forest of multiple things, I have other trees that can actually help the elms. So I might not lose every elm in a forest when that forest has other trees in it, beech and birch and oak and etc. It's so fascinating. And when, like I said, here's why I love nature as a metaphor, is because it's so clear when we talk about it like that. And yet when we take it into our families or into our business, into our leadership, we don't celebrate the oak for being an oak. We're like, no, you should be more like the elm, or whatever it is, right? We tell each other these stories about how we should be different.
And isn't it more because we're uncomfortable with our own identity?
Yeah.
Either we don't know it or we've been shamed by it. And so that then gets projected out on others.
Exactly.
And if we can learn, so what I'm hearing you say too is that if we can learn to talk, if we can learn to transcend competition, and we can see each other for the potential of what they are, and where we can come together as a diverse, inclusive society, that's when we are going to have the most productive and most beautiful world. And it starts with ourselves, doesn't it?
It does. And you've said this multiple times of conflict is an opportunity. When we step into conflict, it's just because it's an oak talking to an elm and they don't speak the same language. It doesn't mean that one is right or one is wrong. It's an opportunity for an oak to get to know an elm.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's such a rich metaphor. And I think that this week, if all of our listeners could take a moment and go outside and observe the diversity and the complexity that is nature. And it's everywhere. And I don't care if you live in an urban setting or a suburban setting or a rural setting, you will find nature. It is surviving everywhere, from the weeds in your sidewalk cracks to the squirrels skittering along the overhead lines. It will survive. It will find a way. And it's such a beautiful metaphor for us, for our lives and our leadership.
This is excellent. And good news too. So go out and get out and hug a tree. And if you want to do the internal work, we have a wonderful, on our website, the soulfulleaderpodcast.com. We have a Find Your Genius, and it's a free assessment that will look at your frequency, the way that you think. And it's a really fun thing to do. Like I said, it's free. You'll get a little video and a download with it, with information, and you can share it with your family, your loved ones, your team, your leaders around you, so that you can understand, hey, we're all looking basically at the same thing, but from a different perspective, and how that creates the diversity and the inclusiveness when we can lift each other up.
Yeah, I love that test. It's awesome. And that's the thing that we were talking about earlier. So Thank you guys so much. We would love to hear your feedback. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that are listening who know much more about nature than we do. So please feel free to give us your feedback and your inputs and the things that you find in your lives of like, that's really helped me, that metaphor. We would love to hear about it. So remember that I put everything, all the links that we talk about into our show notes. So if you're driving, don't worry about it. Go to our show notes. You'll get the link to the little free profile test that's on our website. And you can always find us also on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page and on our LinkedIn page. All of those are under Soulful Leader. Thanks so much. We'll talk to y'all next week.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader podcast with your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslack. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.